Have you ever been told you don't belong? Not because of what you paid or who you are, but because of what you look like on an ordinary day. Have you ever watched a stranger get sized up by a uniform and felt your chest tighten because it reminded you of a moment you swallowed your own pride? Picture this Atlanta late afternoon. The first-class line boards in a hush. A black man in a charcoal hoodie hands over a valid pass. Seat 1A. The scanner beeps green, yet a smile hardens. A ticket tears in two, and his name quietly disappears from the tablet. Around him, phones rise. A young trainee hesitates. The cabin holds its breath. What do you do in that breath? Do you keep walking? Do you film? Do you speak? Do you confront your own fear, or let the moment pass? In the next 30 minutes, the balance of power will flip. The passenger in the hoodie is Elias Morgan, CEO and co-founder of BlueJet. He chooses calm over fury, evidence over ego. He will call for accountability in front of a full cabin, and every choice made in silence will suddenly matter. If it were your father, your daughter, your friend in that seat, what would you hope a stranger would do for them? What would you want your past self to do for you? Lean in. Hear the words that were said and the ones that should have been. Let this flight show you how dignity lands and how one quiet decision can reroute an entire company. If this story makes your heart beat a little faster, tap, share it with someone who needs courage today, and subscribe so you do not miss what happens when respect finally takes off Atlanta International Airport on a fall afternoon. The air was filled with the smell of coffee, the crunch of suitcase wheels on tile floors, and hurried greetings before departure. A female voice came through the loudspeaker, a little hoarse, as steady as clockwork. BlueJet Flight 482 to Seattle, boarding at Gate D14. First-class passengers, please board first. Elias Morgan pulled a small black suitcase, a steaming espresso in his hand, charcoal hoodie, dark jeans, white sneakers. No one would recognize him as the CEO of BlueJet Airways, the co-founder of the very airline they were about to take off from. And that was exactly what he wanted today: incognito, quiet, observant. He had heard too many vague complaints from staff and passengers that there was an invisible glass ceiling between those who were respected and those who were merely tolerated. Today, he wanted to see for himself. Elias approached the ticket counter. The head stewardess, Catherine Doyle, blonde hair, dark blue uniform, stereotypical smile. Her eyes glanced at him, then stopped on the hoodie. The smile disappeared. "Sir, this is the first-class aisle." Her voice was even and cold. Elias handed over the ticket. "Yes, I know." Catherine looked down at the boarding pass. The name was clearly visible. E. Morgan, first class, seat 1A. She frowned, flipping it over. "Are you sure this doesn't look right?" Elias still smiled. "Maybe the printer is a little blurry, but I think the QR code will still scan." Catherine took the scanner. A green beep sounded valid, but instead of nodding, she narrowed her eyes. "There are a lot of counterfeiters." "What card did you use to buy this ticket?" "Company card." Elias replied briefly. "Which company?" He hesitated, his eyes falling to his hands. "BlueJet." Catherine let out a small laugh. "The kind you use when you don't believe something. BlueJet. That sounds familiar." She looked at her co-pilot, Sean Baker, who was standing nearby. "Sean, come here and look at this. This guy's ticket looks strange." Sean shrugged, glancing Elias over. "First class. You sure you didn't miss a flight?" A few passengers behind him began to look curious. Elias didn't respond. He just stood there, back straight, coffee cup still in hand. Curious glances began to fall on him, a few giggles, a few pitying glances. Catherine suddenly pulled the ticket from his hand and tore off a corner. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you board first class without verifying it." The ticket fell to the floor, as light as a drop of water, but the sound resonated in Elias's chest like the sound of iron. He took a deep, slow breath, his voice low and calm. "You can keep the ticket, but please don't tear it." "Airline rules," Catherine replied, arms folded, chin up. "You can sit in economy. There are plenty of empty seats." The atmosphere was tense. A child held her mother's hand and whispered, "Mommy, why is that girl yelling at him?" The mother pulled her child away, avoiding Elias's gaze. A middle-aged male passenger, Mark Benson, pulled out his phone. The screen lit up, and the camera started rolling. Elias looked around and then back at Catherine. He said softly, just enough to be heard, "You know, sometimes silence is the answer." He turned away, picked up the torn ticket, folded it, and put it in his pocket. A small action, but it carried an invisible weight. He walked to the back of the economy cabin and sat down in row 17A, next to the window. The sunset reflected through the glass, reflecting on his face both calm and heavy. Outside, the loudspeaker blared again. BlueJet 482. Boarding complete. Cabin door closing. Catherine glanced down at the passenger list, her finger tapping lightly on the iPad screen, hovering over the words E. Morgan. A moment later, the words were gone. There was no one by that name on the list. The plane was about to leave the gate. Elias leaned his head back, his eyes still calm. But inside, a wave was rising. He wasn't angry. He didn't need to be. He'd seen what he needed to see. And he knew this flight wouldn't just be a 200-mile journey, but the beginning of something bigger. Outside the window, the streetlights stretched like bright threads. Inside the cabin, Catherine smiled at the other passengers, her sweet voice returning, "Welcome to BlueJet Airways." No one knew that the man she had just humiliated was the founder of this airline. And in the next 30 minutes, she would face the truth that she had never thought of in her entire life. The plane began to roll away from the gate. The low hum of the engines mingled with the sounds of seat adjustments and hushed voices. Elias Morgan sat still, his back against the seat, his eyes fixed on the window. Outside, the airport lights shone through the small drops of rain on the glass. The streaks of light stretched like lines of memory, mingling between present and past. Elias closed his eyes. All the sounds around him faded into the background. In his mind, fragments from years past emerged, as clear as if it had happened yesterday, 23 years ago. Elias had been a baggage handler at this same airport. He remembered the smell of jet fuel and sweat mixed with the humid Georgia summer air. Back then, he dreamed of flying first class just once, to see what it felt like to not have to bend over all day. But each time he was shown the door, with a curt warning, "This area is not for staff." When BlueJet Airways launched 15 years later, he vowed his airline would be different. Every passenger would be treated with equal respect. He believed that was enough. Until today. Elias opened his phone and typed a short text message to Naomi Lee, his longtime assistant Naomi. Incident note at gate D14. The chief flight attendant is being discriminatory. Please mark flight 482 for follow-up. The message was sent. The screen lit up for a few seconds, then turned off. Elias let out a small breath, still holding the phone in his lap. No one around him realized that this small action had just triggered a series of internal checks. A little boy in the opposite row turned to look at Elias, his voice innocent. "Uncle, why are you sitting here?" My mother said first class in the front is more comfortable. Elias smiled and nodded. I just like this seat. This seat is closer to the wing, easier to see the sky. The little boy nodded as if he understood, then turned away. Elias watched, his smile fading. He thought of the anonymous letters he had received to the airline's suggestion box in recent months. They said I didn't fit the image to sit in the front cabin. One wrote, another passenger described being asked to change seats despite having a valid ticket. Elias initially thought these were misunderstandings, but now, having his ticket torn up himself, he knew it wasn't about the procedure. It was about how people looked. The flight attendants walked by, their eyes glancing at his row of seats. Catherine didn't look at Elias once, just walked past as if he were invisible. Sean, the co-pilot, exchanged a few small words with her and then left for the cockpit. Every little detail, every glance. Elias remembered. He wasn't angry, just felt a deep sadness. He used to think people discriminated only out of ignorance, but sometimes they did it because they believed they had the right. The young intern, Sophia Tran, walked over with a tray of water, stopping slightly at row 17. She bowed her head, her voice small but clear. Sir, I'm very sorry about what happened at the gate. I couldn't do anything, but I saw everything. Elias nodded slightly. It's okay. Sophia, some things, just seeing is enough. Sophia trembled slightly, placing the glass of water on the folding table. Her eyes flashed with shame and gratitude. The plane banked slightly as it turned onto the runway. Catherine remained at the front of the cabin, her voice steady. Please fasten your seat belts. We are preparing for takeoff. The voice, over the loudspeaker, sounded exactly like her face, cold and hard. As the plane lifted off the ground, Elias felt a pressure on his back. Every time he flew, the feeling reminded him of his early days as a startup, the days when he slept in the office, ate instant noodles, and made cold calls to investors. He had believed that if he succeeded, people would stop judging him by the color of his skin. But today, a few 100 feet up, he understood. There were still eyes that had never changed. Naomi called back through the Bluetooth headset. Her voice was even and quick. Elias, I have the report. The board will be monitoring the live feed from the cabin camera. Do you want me to intervene now? Elias looked around. Catherine was smiling at a white passenger, her voice different in sweetness. He replied softly, Not yet. Let them express themselves. Sometimes, light only appears when you let the darkness expose itself. Naomi was silent for a few seconds, then said softly, Understood. I will log it internally. Are you okay? Elias chuckled. Okay. I have been through worse than this. The call ended with a soft click. The plane reached cruising altitude. The cabin lights dimmed, and passengers began opening laptops and reading. Elias pulled a small notebook out of his pocket. The first page bore an old line, Respect does not require a first-class ticket. His mother had written it when he was 16. She was a nurse and often said, You can wear old clothes, but your heart must be new every day. Elias gently touched the page, and a familiar warmth welled up in him. A moment later, Mark Benson, the man who had filmed the clip, walked across the aisle. He stopped and whispered, Hey, I filmed her tearing up your ticket. If you need it, I can send it to you. Elias looked at him with a slight smile. Thanks, Mark. Keep it. It might come in handy later. Mark nodded, his voice serious. I don't like seeing people treated like that. No one deserves it, especially on your own company. Elias didn't react, just looked out the window. The wind outside drew long streaks of silver, as if the horizon had never faded. A feeling of emptiness crept into his heart. He wondered how many times this had happened without anyone noticing, without anyone standing up. How many people silently endured it, and then stopped. He knew that most of them just wanted to get there, not want any trouble. Like him today, if he weren't the CEO. He would probably sit still and swallow. Elias opened his notebook and wrote a few lines. Not all wars have gunshots. Some wars have only silence and looks. The waitress pushed the drinks cart past. Catherine glanced at Elias, her voice falsely polite. "Would you like some water?" Elias replied. "Thanks. I have some." She nodded and continued walking, unaware of Sophia's gaze behind her, a look that was somewhere between fear and admiration. The sky outside was turning a deep orange. The last rays of sunlight fell on the wings of the plane, the metal glinting as a reminder. The truth could not be hidden forever. Elias knew the next 30 minutes would be a test, not just for him, but for the entire system he had built. In the cabin, children giggled, laptops closed, and trolley wheels rolled. Everything seemed to blend into a normal, peaceful scene. But somewhere in the air, the storm was starting to rise. Elias leaned his head back in the chair, his eyes distant. "Once respect is lost, everything else is just a facade," he whispered, just loud enough for himself to hear. Then he closed his eyes, letting the steady hum of the engine lull his thoughts. No one in the cabin knew that the man sitting in row 17A was more than just a passenger. He was a man quietly redefining the boundaries between power and dignity. And in just a few dozen minutes, BlueJet Flight 482 would become the story the whole country had to talk about. The plane had stabilized at 32,000 feet. The cabin was lit in a soft yellow, reflecting off tired faces after a long day. Elias sat still, his seatbelt fastened, flipping through a magazine to avoid being noticed. Next to him, 2 passengers were laughing softly, talking about their upcoming vacation in Seattle. He smiled slightly, trying to act like a normal person, but his heart was heavy. From the front of the cabin, the service cart started rolling. Catherine stood in front, while Sean pushed the cart behind, a forced smile on his face, his eyes still filled with a hint of complacency. When they reached row 17, Elias looked up. Catherine didn't look at him, just said coldly, "Coffee or tea?" "Sir, black coffee. No sugar," he replied. Sean picked up the paper cup, poured hot water, and then his hand slipped. The coffee spilled, the dark brown liquid running down the small table, soaking into Elias's clothes. He was startled, but kept quiet, wiping it with a tissue. Sean chuckled, half joking, half sarcastically. "Oh, sorry. My hand slipped. Maybe the coffee color would suit your shirt better." A few people nearby turned around. Some of them chuckled. Catherine said nothing, just stood there watching, then said, "We have wet towels at the back of the cabin. You can get them yourself. We are busy serving other guests." Elias put down his cup, his voice low, even and not angry. "Thank you. I worked as a waiter in a cafe for 4 years. I think I know how to clean without making a mess." Catherine paused, her eyes flashing with something, not regret, but annoyance at being treated so politely. Sean turned away, pulled the cart forward, and whispered, "He's a good actor," Catherine replied, also softly but loud enough for Elias to hear. "He's just the type of person who likes to act polite to score points." Elias heard it all, but he didn't respond. He opened his phone and silently typed a note. disrespectful attitude toward customers. Flight attendant Catherine Doyle and co-pilot Sean Baker. He put the phone away and continued wiping his shirt, his hands steady as if each movement had been planned in advance. Behind her, Sophia Tran saw it all. She gripped her tray tightly, feeling strange inside. She had heard of similar situations in training sessions, but never witnessed it so clearly. She felt both angry and scared. Next to her, a white female passenger shook her head slightly and whispered, "This is embarrassing. Such a polite person being treated like this." Sophia opened her mouth to speak, but Catherine turned back, her eyes warning, "Keep working." "Sophia." She nodded, but inside she felt a fire smoldering. Elias leaned back slightly, his eyes fixed on the window. The night sky was vast, the clouds shimmering under the moonlight. He remembered the first day he had been invited to sit in first class, 10 years ago. He had been the guest of honor, greeted by name, and had his drink poured before takeoff. He had thought, "I have come a long way." But now, being looked down upon in his own airline, he realized status may change, but prejudice remains. He sighed softly, not for himself, but for the people who lived like this every day, people who were judged by their clothes, their voices, their skin color, their eyes. He knew what it felt like to be doubted, to be overlooked, to be relegated to the last seat in a room, because he had been there, and he was there again, just in more expensive clothes. Mark Benson, the passenger who filmed the clip, stood up and walked towards the toilet, passing Elias. He whispered, "My video is starting to get views. Hundreds in 10 minutes. Elias nodded, his eyes not leaving the window. Let it spread. Everything happens for a reason. Sean turned back and met Mark's eyes, then asked Catherine, "Is he filming?" Catherine frowned and lowered her voice. "If he is, let security handle it. I don't want to get involved." Sophia's words reached her ears. She bit her lip. Her hand lightly touched the phone in her pocket, where she had activated the voice recorder. Ever since Catherine had torn up Elias's ticket, she had been recording every word, every whisper. She knew she was breaking the rules, but instinct told her the truth needed to be recorded. Catherine walked to the back of the cabin and said to Sophia, "After you're done serving, go to first class and help me set the trays. Don't linger here." Sophia nodded, but her eyes were still on Elias. He was holding a small notebook, writing something, very slowly, very carefully. She saw his hands tremble slightly, not from anger, but from restraint. Catherine turned away, unaware that several passengers were watching her. No one said anything, but the silence was heavy enough. Elias smiled faintly, a sad smile. He told himself that everything was going exactly as he had predicted. Perhaps this secret investigation did not need a conference room or a report, because the living proof was right in front of him. There was a ding, and the seatbelt sign turned off. Catherine took the microphone. "You can unbuckle your seatbelts. We are at a stable cruising altitude." Her voice was even and emotionless, but as soon as she turned off the microphone, she whispered to Sean, "I don't understand why they let people like that buy first-class tickets." "They look like crap," Sean replied, half joking, half seriously. "They must have won a promotional ticket." Elias heard every word. Without looking at them, he gently placed his hand on the notebook and closed it. He added another line. "Respect is not a matter of policy. It is a matter of character." Suddenly, the plane shook slightly. A few people in the cabin cried out. Catherine quickly stepped forward, her voice loud. "It's okay. Ladies and gentlemen, It's just a little turbulence." Elias looked around, saw Sophia still calm, reassuring an elderly passenger. He noticed the difference. Her gentleness and sincerity were reassuring, even though she was just an intern. While Catherine, the experienced one, made the atmosphere cold and distant. After a while, the plane stabilized. Catherine returned to the rear cabin, her eyes briefly meeting Elias. She said softly, trying to be polite, "I hope you don't mind the incident just now. You know, we have rules to follow." Elias looked at her, his voice as light as the wind. "Rules are never an excuse to lose kindness." Catherine paused, did not answer, then walked quickly away. Sophia saw it all. In that moment, she realized, there are people who can silence others without raising their voices. Outside the window, the moonlit clouds reflected Elias's calm face. He had no idea that the undercurrent in the cabin was building by the minute. Mark's video had already surpassed 5,000 views in half an hour. The hashtag #BlueJetTruth was trending on social media. And back at BlueJet's central office, Naomi Lee had just received her first system notification service incident of critical severity, Flight 482. Elias leaned his head back slightly, whispering as if talking to himself. "A drop of coffee can fall on a shirt, but it can also fall off the mask of an entire system." The cabin was bathed in soft light. Catherine was still smiling at the first-class passengers at the front. Sean was cracking jokes, but in row 17A, the man in the black hoodie was ready for what was next. In his eyes, there was no longer suffering, but a plan taking shape silent, sure, and irreversible. The economy-class cabin gradually quieted down. The lights dimmed, leaving only a few people flipping through magazines or tapping away on keyboards. Elias was still sitting in seat 17A, the light from the small screen reflecting off his face, calm and composed. From the front, Sophia Tran walked slowly down the aisle, the tray of drinks in her hand shaking slightly. She had only been interning for 3 weeks, but today, for the first time, she felt her heart so heavy. Sophia was born in Sacramento, the only child of a Vietnamese mother and an American father. Her mother always taught her there is light everywhere, as long as you don't turn off your own light. That quote helped Sophia get through many difficult days. But now, seeing what is happening to Elias, she wonders if that light is still strong enough to guide her. She stopped at row 17. Elias looked up, his eyes warm but sad. "Are you still working? Everyone should be off by now." Sophia nodded slightly, her voice low. "I can't rest yet, sir. I need to check the equipment." Elias smiled. "Don't worry, I'm not angry with anyone." Those words were like a gentle breeze, but made Sophia feel short of breath, because it was his calmness that made her clearly feel the injustice. Catherine walked over, her voice cold. "Sophia, you have no duties in this compartment. Go back to the first-class area." "Yes, ma'am," Sophia replied, but her eyes still glanced at Elias. Elias nodded slightly, as a silent greeting. As Sophia turned away, she heard Catherine whisper to Sean, "She's still a child. Sometimes pity is a beginner's disease." Sean chuckled. "At least she keeps her mouth shut." Sophia paused for half a second. Her hand gripped the smartwatch, then gently swiped at the glass. The voice recorder was already open. She left it running, not out of curiosity, but because she sensed something important was being tested. She stepped into the first-class cabin. The lighting was different, warm, luxurious, the scent of wine lingering in the air. Passengers were laughing. Staff bowed. Catherine was soft and gentle again. Sophia stood behind her, watching. She saw clearly. Catherine's smile changed like a mask. It was not real, but too perfect. Sophia walked up to the counter and set down her tray. On the table, an iPad displayed a list of passengers. She caught a glimpse of Morgan at the bottom of the list, but only for a few seconds. Catherine walked over, swiped her finger across the screen, and the name disappeared. "What are you doing?" Sophia asked softly. "Just adjusting the list," Catherine replied evenly, not looking at her. "But I don't think it's allowed to remove passengers' names from the flight data." Catherine turned around, her eyes sharp. "Are you teaching me how to work?" Sophia took half a step back. "No. I just remember, I'm in charge here. And if you want to continue your internship, then stay out of my way." Sophia bowed her head, her heart racing. She heard Catherine sigh, then continued scrolling. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. Her hand lightly touched the watch, taking a screenshot of the iPad with the hidden camera, a photo, a piece of evidence. She didn't know where it would lead, but at least it was the truth. About an hour later, when Catherine was at the front, Sophia returned to the economy section. Elias was still in the same place. He was writing something down, his pen moving slowly and steadily. She paused and said softly, "Mr. Morgan." Elias looked up, a little surprised. "You know my name. I saw it on the passenger manifest earlier, and then it was deleted." Elias looked deeply into her eyes. The look confused Sophia, but also made her feel like she was doing the right thing. "You're very brave," Elias said softly. "Not many people dare to look the truth in the face." Sophia smiled slightly. "Maybe because I saw my mother being treated badly just because she didn't speak English well. I hate that feeling." Elias nodded. "I understand, and I promise, everything today will not be in vain." Above, the loudspeakers blared. Catherine announced that the flight was about to encounter turbulence. Sophia returned to the front of the cabin, but her mind was still glued to row 17A. The recording continued to play in her ears. Catherine's voice, Sean's voice, their words to each other. Half an hour later, with the cabin settled, Sophia stood alone in the service area, the light reflecting off her face. She looked at herself in the small mirror behind the drinks cabinet. Her face was young, scared, and determined. She wondered, if I speak out, will I lose my job? A voice in her head answered, maybe, but if I stay silent, will I still respect myself? The question took her breath away. Her mother had said, sometimes silence is a sin. She took out her phone and sent a message to Naomi, the public email address of the BlueJet office. This is Sophia Tran, intern on Flight 482. There are serious issues with passenger behavior and data. I have proof. The message was sent. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly. From a distance, Catherine stepped forward, her smile still intact. What are you doing? Sophia, just sending a brief report to the warehouse. Ma'am? Catherine nodded, her gaze searching but not suspicious. Meanwhile, in row 17, Elias received a text message from Naomi. An intern named Sophia has sent confirmation. I am collecting cabin camera data. He read, a small smile appearing on his face. Not a smile of triumph, but a glimmer of hope that there were still young people who would not let the world become callous. Sophia turned back to the end of the compartment. Her eyes met Elias's. Across the crowd, their gazes met. No words needed, just an understanding. One was initiating the investigation, and the other dared to testify. The loudspeaker announced that the snack was ready to be served. Catherine returned to her professional demeanor. Her voice clipped BlueJet. "Thanks you for choosing us." It was as if nothing had happened. But in the darkness of the narrow cabin, Sophia knew she had crossed the line between safety and reason, and once she had, there was no turning back. Elias looked out the window. The night sky outside was calm, but inside the cabin, a quiet storm had begun. He added another line in his notebook. "Sometimes it's not the most powerful people who change the world, but the ones who dare to do the right thing when no one is looking." The plane glided through the sea of clouds, the engine sounding deep like a heartbeat. In the front cabin, Catherine was chatting happily with a businessman. In the middle cabin, Sophia clenched her fists, her eyes fixed on row 17. And there, Elias Morgan, the man they thought was just a passenger, was waiting for the moment for the truth to take off. The sky outside had turned a deep blue. The plane continued to hurtle through the night, smooth and steady, as if everything were normal. But inside the cabin, the air was different. It was thick, somewhat heavy, like the mist before a storm. Elias Morgan tilted his head slightly and looked out the window. Below, the city lights thinned, then disappeared into the darkness. Above, the moonlight was a pale, chalky line. He heard the wind whistling through the wings, and suddenly thought, sometimes change begins with a small crack that no one notices. Meanwhile, in the row ahead, Mark Benson was glued to his phone. His video of Gate D14 had been shared hundreds of times. "Why did they rip up his ticket?" one person commented. "Just another example of how skin color still determines how you are treated." Another wrote, "The hashtag BlueJetTruth began to spread slowly but steadily." Mark turned to look at Elias. He was still calm, as if he didn't know what was going on outside. Mark asked softly, "Do you want me to delete the video? People are starting to talk." Elias looked at him, his eyes gentle and deep. "No need. The truth doesn't need to be hidden. Mark, it just needs to be seen." Mark nodded, silent. Something moved inside him, a quiet respect. From above, Catherine walked through the economy class, her face still calm. She noticed a few people looking at her strangely. A female passenger whispered, "That's her, the one who tore the ticket." Catherine heard clearly, but pretended not to notice. She pursed her lips, the cold smile still in place. As she passed Elias, their eyes met for a moment. Elias said softly, just enough for her to hear, "The first crack is always where one thinks one is the strongest." Catherine frowned, not understanding, but there was a strange feeling in her heart, discomfort and vague unease. Sophia returned from the first compartment, carrying a tray of water. She saw Catherine standing near Elias, her eyes defensive. She hesitated for a moment, then approached. "Miss, do you need any help?" Catherine looked at her, smiling faintly. "No, just remember your place." Elias looked up, his gaze on Sophia. For a moment, he saw the struggle in her eyes, between fear and courage. He said softly, "Sometimes, position is not as important as which side you choose to stand on." That sentence made Sophia pause. She nodded slightly, then walked away, her heart pounding. Sean stepped out of the cockpit and whispered to Catherine, "The video is going viral. Some people are saying they'll report it to the company." Catherine frowned. "We'll say he's causing trouble. No one would believe a guy in a hoodie is a businessman." Sean laughed. "Yeah, he looks like a working-class man." The two chuckled, unaware that Sophia was standing right behind them, listening to everything. She turned away, her heart pounding. She grabbed her phone and opened the news app. The video had indeed gone viral, tens of thousands of views in just a few hours. I flew BlueJet and had the same thing happen to me. One person commented, "If this is real, the company should publicly apologize." Sophia swallowed. She knew this was no small matter. Meanwhile, Naomi Lee was monitoring the data stream in the BlueJet office in Chicago. The screen in front of her showed the cabin signal, audio, and video from the internal cameras. She saw Catherine, saw Elias, saw Sophia. Catherine's voice rang out clearly. "I'm in charge here. No one can teach me." Naomi frowned and pressed speed dial. A small signal lit up in Elias's earpiece. Naomi said softly, "Elias, everything is being recorded. We have a copy of the entire Flight 482 data." "Do you need me to intervene?" Elias replied calmly. "Not yet. Let the truth speak for itself." Naomi paused for a moment, then said, "Understood. But you should know. The passenger video is going viral. In a few hours, the media will get involved." Elias smiled. "The sooner, the better." Catherine turned back to the back of the cabin and noticed Elias making small talk through his headset. She frowned. "Who are you communicating with?" "With yourself," Elias replied. "Don't joke. I asked you not to use the communication device on the plane. Really, I was just listening to music." Elias removed one headset and smiled slightly. Catherine was silent, her eyes suspicious, then left. In the cabin, Sophia walked slowly from row to row, handing out drinks to the passengers. A little girl about 8 years old sitting with her mother raised her head and asked, "Auntie, why were those uncles and aunts scolded just now?" Sophia bowed slightly and smiled. "Sometimes adults forget how to behave properly." Her mother looked at her with gratitude in her eyes. Elias looked at that scene, and his heart softened. He realized that even in injustice, there were still small pieces of goodness, like Sophia, like that mother, like Mark with the phone in his hand. Perhaps it was people like that were the real hope. The plane shook slightly. A sound came from the front, a small text message chime. Catherine flipped open her phone and saw an internal message from BlueJet headquarters. "Remain calm. There may be internal monitoring on Flight 482. No further action." Sweat trickled down her forehead. She looked around, trying to guess who was under internal monitoring. She glanced at Elias the hoodie, the calm gaze, the small notebook in his hand. Her heart pounded. A flash of fear passed through her, but then she reassured herself. No way. How could a guy like that be important? She put the phone away, but in her mind, the first crack had already appeared. In the background, Sophia opened her phone and read the new messages. Naomi replied to her email. "Thank you for your courage. Sophia, all the data you sent is being stored. Please keep it safe." Sophia looked at the screen, feeling both anxious and relieved. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to do the right thing. Elias quietly added another line in the notebook. "People are not afraid of the dark. They are only afraid of being seen living in it." Outside, the moon was high. The cabin was silent again, but the silence was no longer peaceful. It was a premonitory silence, like the stillness of water before a wave. Mark looked up and saw Catherine walking quickly towards the cockpit, her face tense. He quietly turned on the camera again. The lens caught Catherine whispering to Sean. Her voice drifted through the microphone. "I don't know why someone filmed that. If the higher-ups find out, I'm done for." Mark saved the video and said nothing. He just thought, sometimes justice doesn't need a shout. It just needs someone to capture the moment. Elias leaned his head back and closed his eyes. In the darkness, he thought of what his father had said. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to say the right thing when everyone else is quiet. The plane hurtled through the night, through thick clouds. Inside, everyone believed it was a normal flight, but in reality, everything changed the moment Catherine tore up the ticket. The first crack appeared, and once it started, there was no stopping the wall from falling. The atmosphere in the cabin gradually became heavier. Although Catherine tried to maintain a smile and a professional demeanor, everyone could sense that something was going on behind the calm. Curious glances, quiet whispers, phones raised to take secret photos. It all created an undercurrent that Catherine began to fear. Elias Morgan remained seated in seat 17A. On the table before him was a half-empty glass of water. He looked at his reflection in the water, calm, but his eyes were as sharp as knives. He had been through many negotiations, many tense meeting rooms, but never had he seen a lesson so clear. A system could collapse because of a small act, when people forgot that respect was its foundation. Sophia Tran stepped out of the first cabin, carrying her iPad. She was about to hand Catherine a brief report on the passenger list, but stopped as she approached. Catherine was speaking quietly to Sean, her voice urgent. We have to erase all traces of that person. I've erased his name from the passenger manifest. Now we just need to update the flight log and pretend he never existed. Sean was surprised. You can do that. The system will report an error. No. I've done it before. Just change the verification code, and the reason is incorrect booking information. If anyone checks, I'll say the passenger was disruptive and was moved to economy class for security reasons. Sean nodded. Smart. We have to protect our image. I won't let a small mess ruin my record, Catherine said firmly. Sophia stood behind the curtain, her heart pounding. Her hands were shaking, but she opened the recording app. Catherine's voice was clear in the file, every word, every sentence. She knew this was the most important piece of evidence. Elias glanced up. He met Sophia's eyes, quick, anxious, but clear. He understood. The look said it all. They were deleting him from the system. He nodded, a silent, thank you. When Catherine returned, Sophia pretended to bow. Miss, I need to update the flight log, but it seems that one passenger's name is missing. Yes, I just corrected it. He was changed to a different ticket type. Do I need to confirm the reason with the technical department? No need. I've already written down the reason. What reason? Miss Catherine glanced at her, her voice low. The passenger was causing trouble. That's enough. Sophia was silent. She turned away, but her eyes were slightly moist, not from fear, but from pain. Pain from seeing the truth twisted right in front of her, by people she had believed were professional role models. Catherine did not know that every word she said was being recorded. On the small watch on Sophia's wrist, the recording indicator light was still on. Elias pulled out his phone and opened an instant message to Naomi. My name has just been removed from the passenger list. Action recorded on the server. Maybe now is the time. Naomi replied immediately. Got it. I'm backing up the data. We can send a warning signal directly to the council in 20 minutes. Elias typed back. Wait for my signal. I want them to reveal themselves. A passenger sitting near Elias turned around and said softly, I read about the incident. Your video's going viral. Elias chuckled. I'm just a passenger. Don't worry. The other person nodded, his eyes still filled with curiosity. At the front of the cabin, Catherine placed her iPad on the table. entered the security code and confirmed the deletion of the record. The screen read, Passenger E. Morgan, code 1A, has been removed from the list. A small message appeared. Warning, passenger has been successfully checked in. Catherine pressed the delete button, then turned off the screen. Are you okay? Sean asked softly. Okay. No one will know. Sophia saw it all. She took another picture. The screen flashed a red warning before it blacked out. Her hand shook slightly, but her gaze was steady. Elias remained silent, as if nothing had happened. He opened his notebook and wrote a few lines. People can erase my name from the list, but they cannot erase their own conscience. A moment later, Catherine approached, her voice falsely polite. Mr. Morgan, I just updated the list. Unfortunately, the system reported an error, so you may not be served first-class meals anymore. I hope you understand. Elias looked up, his eyes calm. Thank you. I don't need a meal. I just need fairness. Catherine was stunned for a moment, then smiled faintly. Fairness is not on the menu. Sir. Maybe not, Elias said, his voice low. But it is the only thing that can keep an airline alive for a long time. Catherine turned away without answering, but the words kept echoing in her head. In the cabin. Sophia quietly sent the audio file and photos to Naomi's secure email. She noted, There is evidence that Catherine Doyle deleted passenger data. Sean Baker confirms his knowledge and consent. Naomi got the message and immediately turned on the cabin camera link. The image appeared Catherine in front, Sean behind, and Elias sitting in row 17, silent. Everything was clear. Naomi exhaled, her voice calm but quick. Elias, enough data? When you're ready, we can call the council into the live channel. How far do you want them to go? Elias replied. A little more. I want them to incriminate themselves without me saying anything. A slight tremor passed as the plane passed through the turbulence. Catherine walked quickly to the front of the cabin, her voice steady as she tried to reassure the passengers. But she was uneasy. She felt something slipping through her fingers. I don't like this, Sean whispered. I think his eyes are strange. Don't worry. He's just a customer. The most we'll do is apologize, Catherine replied, but her voice lacked confidence. Sophia stood behind the curtain, looking through it. She saw Catherine purse her lips and tap her iPad with her fingers, a sign of nervousness. She remembered what her mother had said when someone is scared. They often reveal more than they want to hide. Elias looked up, his eyes meeting the small cabin camera above. He knew Naomi was watching. He smiled slightly, almost imperceptibly. Everything was ready. He took out his phone and opened a new message. Initiating internal verification process. I want to see their response in the next 10 minutes. Naomi replied. Understood. The system will send a service behavior check notification to all crew members on Flight 482. Time 10 minutes. Elias closed the book, put his hand to his chest, and took a deep breath. He wasn't angry, but he felt hurt not because he was offended, but because he felt the organization he had built had forgotten its soul. 10 minutes later, a small sound rang from Catherine's smartwatch. She looked down and saw the message Service Behavior Inspection Notice. Flight 482. Please confirm the transparency and passenger service attitude. Catherine paled. Sean, is HQ watching us? Sean looked at his watch and got the same message. He was silent, sweating. Catherine turned her head to look at the back of the cabin, where Elias was sitting, his eyes calm and unsmiling. In that moment, she felt like she was being seen through. Sophia walked over and said softly, "Everything is recorded. Miss—" Catherine was stunned. "What did you say?" "It's just, the system always has a backup," Sophia replied, her eyes shining. Elias sat still, saying nothing. He knew the wheels of justice had begun to roll, slowly but unstoppably. Above, BlueJet 482 raced westward through the night clouds. At 30,000 feet, the truth was emerging, not through words, but through audio recordings, images, and the eyes of witnesses. And in that silence, Elias knew. The next chapter in this confrontation was only a matter of time. A slight crackling sound from the intercom echoed throughout the cabin, startling everyone. "Please hold your seat. The system is performing a routine check." The automated voice was flat and emotionless. But in the first-class cabin, Catherine Doyle was almost stunned. She knew BlueJet had never performed a routine check mid-flight. This was a signal from headquarters. Sean sat in the cockpit, looking at the control panel. On the secondary screen, the internal behavior monitor icon lit up red. He turned to Catherine, his voice hoarse. "We have a problem." Catherine swallowed and stepped out quickly. The white light of the cabin illuminated her face, making her expression clearer. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled slightly. "Sorry for the interruption. Just a little security procedure," she said. Elias Morgan looked up, his eyes still calm, even gentle. He replied softly, "Process is always a good thing, as long as it is not used to cover up mistakes." Catherine was embarrassed and said nothing. She turned away and walked quickly forward, where Sean was waiting. In the cockpit, a new signal lit up. Naomi Lee, from BlueJet's Chicago office, was calling directly over the intercom. Her voice was steady, professional, but with a weight that made Sean sweat a little. "This is Naomi Lee, Interim Director of Safety Operations. Flight 482 is currently being monitored due to unusual reports of unethical behavior by the crew. Please confirm your identity, crew number, and cabin status." Sean looked at Catherine. She shook her head and whispered, "Don't answer. It could be a test." Naomi continued, "This is not a test. I repeat, this is an official dispatch channel. All data is being logged." Sean bit his lip and pressed the confirm button. "Sean Baker, code 48132 co-pilot. Cabin normal. No problems." And Chief Flight Attendant Catherine Doyle. Catherine took a deep breath. "Present. Cabin normal." Naomi paused for a moment and said, "Thank you. I want you to know that we have received the internal voice recording and cabin footage from the beginning of the flight. We request that the crew not change any of the data. Any interference will be dealt with according to regulations." Catherine looked at Sean, her face pale. "Oh no, they know everything," she whispered. "In the back of the cabin." Sophia Tran listened in on the intercom she was using to check the service. She turned to Elias and whispered, "They're calling straight from headquarters." Elias nodded, his voice low. "Now all the covers are down." Catherine rushed out of the cockpit, her eyes panicked. She looked around, then turned to Elias, her voice sharp. "You! What did you do?" Elias looked up, not answering immediately. He put down the notebook, his voice low but resonant. "I only tell the truth. As for what you did, you know better than anyone." All eyes in the cabin turned to them. Mark Benson, the passenger who had filmed the video, raised his phone again. A middle-aged woman in row 18 whispered, "That's the guy they ripped up the ticket for." Catherine stepped forward, trying to keep her composure. "You're causing trouble. I asked you not to film or spread false information. Elias looked straight at her. False. You just lied to hundreds of people on this plane, then removed my name from the passenger manifest. That's not false. That's forgery. Catherine choked, her face red. Sean stepped out from the cockpit, his voice harsh. You have no right to criticize the crew. We follow procedures. Elias smiled slightly, his eyes as deep as the sea. If procedures allow you to insult and erase the identity of passengers just because they don't look like the people you want to serve, then that procedure should be broken. A young passenger spoke up. I saw it from the beginning. He didn't do anything. They tore up his ticket. A commotion arose. Catherine took a deep breath, trying to regain her voice. Please calm down. This is a misunderstanding, Naomi interrupted over the intercom. Catherine Doyle, please stop speaking immediately. Everything you say is being recorded and will be reviewed by the board. Catherine froze. Naomi continued, her voice calm but sharp as a knife. Mr. Morgan, please confirm your location. I have connected the council via secure line. Elias slowly stood up. He spoke clearly, each word echoing throughout the cabin. My name is Elias Morgan. I am a shareholder and CEO of BlueJet Airways. I am on my own company's flight 482. The air was suddenly deathly quiet. No more whispers, no more engine noises, just the shocked faces of Catherine, Sean, and the passengers around them. Mark almost shouted, Oh my God, you're the CEO. Elias nodded slightly. Yes, and I've seen with my own eyes how you define the word service. I don't need to investigate further. Everyone on this flight is a witness. Catherine stepped back, her voice trembling. I don't know. If I knew who you were. You don't need to know who I am. Elias interrupted, his voice low. You only need to know that I am a human being, a passenger who paid for his seat, like everyone else. But you didn't see that. Catherine opened her mouth but couldn't speak. Sean lowered his eyes, his hands clenching. Naomi spoke firmly. Mr. Morgan, the board is listening. You have the right to make a decision now. Elias took a deep breath. He looked around the cabin curious, stunned, and moved faces. He said slowly, Before we make a decision, I want to say this. No one is born with privilege. Rights come when we learn to respect others. And when an organization forgets that, it must be rebuilt from the ground up. Catherine burst into tears, her voice choking. Please, I just want discipline. No, Elias replied. You wanted power, not discipline, and that is why you lost both, Naomi said over the loudspeaker. Notice CEO Elias Morgan's decision. The board confirms the terms of direct action. Elias nodded, his voice even and cold. Catherine Doyle. Sean Baker, you are suspended with immediate effect. The plane will land temporarily in Denver. A new crew will take over. Everyone in the compartment held their breath. Catherine took a step back, tears streaming down her face. Sean was silent, head bowed. The air was thick. A man in row 20 started clapping, then a second. Then the whole compartment erupted in slow, heavy, emotional applause. Elias didn't smile. He just nodded slightly, as if in thanks. He looked at Sophia, who was standing in the corner of the cabin, her eyes brimming with tears. He said softly, just enough for her to hear, Thank you for not keeping quiet. Sophia choked up. I was only doing the right thing. Sir, sometimes that's all it takes to change a system, Elias replied. Catherine slumped in her chair, her face pale. Sean took off his badge and placed it on the console. Naomi announced, The takeover team is waiting in Denver. All decisions will be made official after landing. Elias sat back in his chair, outside the window. The sky was still dark, but seemed a little lighter. He closed his eyes, not because he was tired, but because in that moment he felt lighter. In the earpiece, Naomi whispered. "You did the right thing," Elias replied. "I didn't do it to be right. I did it because I couldn't let the wrong thing continue." The plane banked slightly toward Denver. Applause echoed through the cabin, mingling with the engine noise. It was a quiet night, but it was the quiet after a storm. As the plane touched down on the Denver runway, there was a soft thump, followed by what felt like a collective sigh of relief. The engine noise died down. The passengers remained silent. No one spoke. The air was thick, a mixture of metallic smells, cold coffee, and an indescribable feeling of shock mixed with relief. Elias Morgan opened his eyes. He looked around, the pale yellow light reflecting off the faces of people who had just been through a big wave. Mark Benson turned to look at him, his eyes full of respect. "I've never seen anything like this in my life," Mark said softly. "Thank you for not being silent." Elias nodded slightly, his voice low. "Thank you for not turning off the camera." From the front, Catherine Doyle slumped in her seat, her eyes red. Sean stood near the cockpit door, so silent he seemed to have disappeared from the space. Sophia walked over and gently placed her hand on Catherine's shoulder. "You should drink some water," Sophia said softly. Catherine raised her head and looked at her, her eyes empty. "You don't understand. I've devoted my whole life to this company, only to be ridiculed like that in front of everyone." Sophia looked straight at her, not angry, just sad. "I understand that feeling, but sometimes people lose, not because they're exposed, but because they forget why they started." Catherine looked at her, lips trembling, unable to speak. The cabin door opened. 3 ground staff in blue uniforms from BlueJet entered, led by a woman in her 40s with a determined face, Linda Ward, head of airport security. She approached, her voice calm. "I am Linda Ward, in charge of security and ground coordination. Under the direction of the BlueJet board, we will take over this flight." Everyone looked at each other, whispering softly. Linda continued, "The crew has been temporarily asked to leave the cabin to coordinate work. Passengers will be served by a replacement team within 10 minutes. Catherine stood up, her face pale. Sean quietly took off his headphones, put them on the table, and followed. When they passed Elias, Catherine stopped, her voice hoarse. "I know I was wrong, but please don't let this ruin my life." Elias looked at her, his eyes deep, neither cold nor soft. "No one can ruin your life but you. Use today's lesson to start over." Catherine bowed her head, tears rolling down her face. She walked away, not looking back. Linda turned to Elias and nodded slightly. "Mr. Morgan, I have received the complete file. The board is in emergency session. Perhaps you should speak to them before the flight continues." Elias stood up and adjusted his jacket. "Connect." Linda opened the communication device. A small screen lit up with blue light. The faces of the 5 members of the BlueJet board appeared, the people who had built this empire from scratch with him. In the middle was the interim president, Ms. Karen Fox, a woman with silver hair, sharp but calm eyes. "Elias," Karen said, "we watched the entire internal broadcast. What you did was truly remarkable," Elias replied. "I didn't do it for glory. I just wanted to remember that this company was built to lift people up, not to tear them down." Another member spoke up. We have over 6,000 employees. One wrong move can spread like an epidemic. But what you just did, it was the most powerful antibiotic." Karen nodded, then asked, "What do you want us to do next?" Elias pondered for a few seconds. "Show this recording to all employees in their training program, not to humiliate anyone, but to remind them that respect is never a luxury." Karen smiled slightly. "You always know how to turn a wound into a lesson," Elias replied. "Because I made mistakes too, and someone gave me a chance to do it again." Naomi Lee appeared in the corner of the screen, holding an electronic document. "I have prepared a retraining plan for the entire staff, and Sophia Tran, the intern who sent the first memo, is asking you to consider her for special consideration." Elias smiled. "She deserves better than that. I want her to go straight to the Chicago headquarters as an assistant customer safety coordinator. She has something that many people lack: courage." Linda took notes. Sophia stood behind, stunned. She stammered, "Sir, I don't know what to say." Elias turned back, his voice soft. "No need to say anything. Just keep being the person you are today." Karen nodded. "Then we agree. Elias, rest. We will take care of the rest." Elias nodded, turning off the screen. He sat down in his chair and took a deep breath. Outside, the airport lights reflected in the windows like thousands of tiny dots, like renewed hope. Mark approached, smiling slightly. Maybe this flight will be rewritten in the aviation history books. Elias smiled gently. "I just hope it makes some people look back at how they treat others." Mark nodded, his eyes distant. "I have lived for 40 years, and for the first time I see someone win with calmness, not anger." Linda returned, her voice soft. "Mr. Morgan, the flight will continue in a few minutes. The new team is ready." Elias stood up and looked out the window. Snow was beginning to fall, sparkling under the lights. Denver is always cold, but today I feel warm. Sophia approached, carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. "I thought you might need these." Elias took them, nodding slightly. "Thank you. Sophia, you know, sometimes it's the people at the bottom who keep the soul of an organization." Sophia smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I just did what my mother taught me: if you see something wrong, don't look away." "And you did the right thing," Elias said, his voice soft but warm. The cabin door closed. A new voice came over the loudspeaker, a new, gentle-voiced chief stewardess. "Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rachel Ortiz, interim captain. Thank you for your patience. We will now continue our journey to Seattle." The engine roared again. The yellow light bathed the cabin, creating a strange sense of peace. Mark sat down and opened his notebook. He wrote, "There are flights that last only a few hours, but leave an impression that lasts a lifetime." Elias looked out the window. The sky was darkening, but a soft light was shining through. He closed his eyes and muttered, "No one is born fair, but everyone can choose to be fair to others." Sophia sat in the back seat, watching him silently. She felt as if she had just witnessed not just an incident, but a turning point for herself, for the company, and perhaps for the whole little world. The plane rose higher and higher, breaking through the clouds. Below, Denver was covered in snow, and above, a new journey had truly begun. The plane took off from Denver in the pale blue light of dusk. The city below shrank, its rows of buildings twinkling like falling stars. The western sky turned a deep purple, tinged with the fading orange of the last day. No one spoke loudly. Everyone was silent, as if reluctant to disturb the new calm that had been restored after the storm. Elias Morgan sat silently, staring out the window. The thin streaks of condensation formed on the glass, reflecting his pensive gaze. He hadn't expected to spend the day this way, being insulted, humiliated, and then being the one to take on his own employees. It all happened in a matter of hours, but it left him with a shockwave. Sophia Tran walked over, holding a cup of tea. "I know you prefer tea to coffee," she said softly. Elias smiled and took it. "You're perceptive." Sophia sat down in the empty seat next to him. "I still can't believe it's all really happening. Everyone in the cabin says it's like watching a movie." Elias looked out the window. "Life is more like a movie than you think. Except, in real life, you have to live with the consequences after the scene is over." Sophia was silent. She looked at her hands, small and trembling slightly. "Were you ever afraid?" "When you were treated like that," Elias sipped his tea, still looking at the sky. "Yes, I was afraid too. But being afraid doesn't mean letting others define you." He turned to look at her. "If I get angry, they will say I'm overreacting. If I stay silent, they will think I'm weak. So I chose the third way, acting calmly." Sophia nodded, her eyes lighting up. "You remind me of my father. He once said true strength is when you know how to control yourself." Elias chuckled. "Your father was a wise man." "He's dead," Sophia said, her voice choking. "He was a pilot. He was fired from the airline for reporting a cheating colleague. After that, no one dared to hire him again." Elias was silent for a second. He put down his teacup and said softly, "I'm sorry." Sophia smiled sadly. "It's okay. But from that day on, I swore that if something similar happened to me, I wouldn't stay silent." Elias looked at her for a long time. There was something in his eyes like pride, like compassion mixed with hope. "You didn't just keep your promise, Sophia. You made it meaningful." Meanwhile, in the front cabin, a new crew of flight attendants was rearranging food, seats, and towels for passengers. Rachel Ortiz, the new head flight attendant, watched everything with a professional eye. She had been personally interviewed by Elias 2 years earlier. Now she had been chosen to replace Catherine not just for her ability, but for her kindness. Rachel walked up to Elias and bowed. "Sir, the crew is stable. The passengers are all satisfied. Thank you for your trust." Elias nodded. "Thank you. Rachel, you did a great job." Rachel smiled. "I just do what you taught me. No matter who the passengers are, just remember that they are human." Elias chuckled softly at that remark. He looked at Rachel, then at Sophia. 2 women from 2 different generations, but both carrying the same light. A new belief gradually formed in his heart. At the back of the cabin, Mark Benson was typing something on his laptop. He was writing a blog post titled Flight 482, When Justice Takes Flight. His opening line was simple. "I saw what everyone should see at least once in their lives, the courage to not shout, to not turn away." When the plane reached a stable altitude, Elias stood up and walked down the aisle. Several passengers nodded to him. An elderly woman took his hand. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir, for making me believe that justice still exists." Elias smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "Justice is not far away. It is in how we choose to treat each other." He continued walking, stopping in the middle of the compartment, where Catherine had stood when she tore up his ticket. He stared at the spot for a long time, as if facing a past so close yet so far away. In his head, the voice of his father echoed, the one who had taught him as a child's son. "Never forget, It's what you do when no one is looking that defines you. A sense of peace washed over him. He knew everything would change after this flight. The company, the team, and himself. Naomi Lee called through her headset. "Elias, the media is calling. They want to know the company's official response." Elias replied, "Don't release a statement. Let me speak directly." "You want an interview?" Naomi asked. "No. I want to speak to the staff first. They need to hear this from me, not from the press." Naomi was silent for a moment, then softly replied, "I understand." Elias returned to his seat. Sophia looked at him and asked quietly, "What would you say to them?" Elias smiled. "That sometimes we forget that our job is not just to operate planes, but to bring people closer together. And that can only be done when we respect each passenger and each colleague." Sophia nodded. She looked at him with admiration. "Have you ever thought, if you hadn't revealed yourself today, things would have been different?" Elias thought for a moment. "Maybe. But sometimes you have to let others see you not to prove anything, but to make them look at themselves in the mirror." The sky outside was beginning to lighten. The western horizon was tinged with the first orange rays. Elias looked out, letting out a small breath. "We're almost to Seattle." Sophia smiled slightly. "A long but memorable flight." Elias nodded. "Every journey is worth it if it makes us better." The announcement came over the loudspeaker. "We will be landing in Seattle in approximately 40 minutes. The ground temperature is 54 degrees Fahrenheit." The passengers began to stir slightly, packing up their belongings. A middle-aged man approached Elias and held out his hand. "I am a lawyer. If you need me, I am willing to testify." Elias took his hand and smiled. "Thank you. But today, I don't need a lawyer. I just need people. Up ahead." Rachel was about to thank the passengers through the loudspeaker. Sophia helped her fold the towel. Their eyes met in the small mirror. Rachel whispered, "You did a great job." "Sophia?" Sophia smiled. "I just followed my heart." Rachel nodded. "That's enough." Elias sat down and looked out the window again. The sky was no longer purple, but a pale yellow. The light fell on his face, gentle and warm. He closed his eyes gently, not because he was tired, but because he felt complete. Somewhere in the cabin, Mark was rereading his article. He added a final line. "Sometimes you don't need to win against anyone. You just need to win against your own fear." The plane banked slightly, plunging through the thin cloud cover. Outside, Seattle emerged into the dawn, calm and bright. For everyone on board, something had changed, not just the place, but the way they saw the world. Elias said softly, almost in a whisper, "There are storms that come not to destroy, but to cleanse the sky." The plane descended, breaking through a thin layer of cloud. Below, Seattle appeared in the dawn light, its skyscrapers reflecting the pink of the early sun. The sea glittered in the distance. The harbor was shrouded in mist, and Mount Rainier loomed behind a veil of white clouds. Passengers tilted their heads to look out, many smiling. They weren't just arriving, they were on a journey they knew they would remember forever. Elias Morgan leaned back in his chair and took a deep breath. He didn't feel tired. Only a rare sense of peace filled his heart. Sophia Tran was still in the other row, her eyes facing the window, her hand holding a cup of cold tea. As the first rays of sunlight streamed into the cabin, she whispered, "So beautiful." Elias looked at her and smiled. "It is beautiful. But this beauty will be meaningless if we don't learn something from the darkness." "Ladies and gentlemen," said the voice of the chief flight attendant Rachel over the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, BlueJet Flight 482 is about to land at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Please fasten your seat belts. The current temperature is 55 degrees Fahrenheit. We thank you for your patience and confidence." That sound, so normal, moved many people. Mark Benson put down his laptop, smiled slightly. He looked at Elias. "You know, I finished writing the article. It's called When Justice Wears a Gray Suit. I'm going to send it to the Seattle Tribune. But before I publish it, I want to ask you, do you want to remain anonymous?" Elias shook his head slightly. "No, because this story isn't about me. It's about everyone who has been misjudged because of their appearance. Just leave my name out there so others have the courage to stand up." Mark nodded, his eyes respectful. "I understand, and I believe this article will change many people." The engine noise faded as the plane touched down on the runway. The passengers applauded, not just because the flight was safe, but because they knew they had just witnessed something bigger than a journey. Elias looked around. Some were in tears. Others looked back at him with grateful eyes. A boy of about 10 years old sat near the aisle, tilted his head and asked his mother, "Mommy, is that uncle a good man?" His mother smiled. "Yes, he is a good man, my son, because he dares to do the right thing." The plane stopped. Seatbelts clicked. Passengers scrambled to retrieve their luggage. Rachel walked over and said softly, "Mr. Morgan, the airline's press team is waiting outside the gate. They want you to make a short statement." Elias nodded. "Okay, but I don't want them to set up a stage or raise a microphone. I just want to talk to the staff and passengers." Rachel smiled. "I'll arrange it." Sophia walked beside Elias along the exit. With each step, she felt like she was stepping through a new door in her life. "Did you ever think it would become so big?" she asked. Elias replied, "I just thought if I kept quiet, someone else would continue to suffer. Every change starts with one person who dares not to keep quiet." As the plane doors opened, the cool morning air rushed in. The sight before them was breathtaking. Dozens of BlueJet employees lined up in the aisle, each holding a small sign that read, "We see you. We respect you." Elias paused, speechless. This was not a PR campaign. It was a spontaneous reaction from the staff, as the video and news had spread across the internet in a matter of hours. A young female employee approached, her eyes red. "Sir, thank you for teaching us what no training session could have taught us." Elias touched her shoulder. "Thank you for wanting to learn." Outside the reception area, the media began to gather. Cameras flashed and names were called. Elias stepped onto the small podium that the staff had set up. He had no paper or prepared speech. He just looked at everyone, his voice calm. "I don't want to repeat what happened. You all know. But I want to say this: none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, including me. But the important thing is whether we dare to look back on those mistakes or not." He paused, looking at the young employees, including Sophia. "This company is not built on planes or license plates. It is built on people. Each person is part of the soul of BlueJet, and that soul can only exist when we respect each other." There was a burst of applause. A reporter asked loudly, "Do you intend to punish more severely?" Elias smiled. "Punishment is not for the sake of anger, but for the sake of correction. I have spoken privately with Catherine Doyle and Sean Baker. They have apologized and agreed to participate in the rehabilitation program. If they truly change, they will have a chance to come back. I do not want to destroy anyone. I just want them to learn what we all learned today." The crowd fell silent. Then someone clapped, then another, then everyone else. The applause echoed through the great hall, not of power, but of humanity. Naomi Lee walked over and handed Elias a phone. "Mr. Morgan, I just got a call from the council. They want you to take a few days off." Elias smiled. "Maybe I will. Is there a quiet place in Seattle?" Naomi chuckled. "Yes, I know a small cafe overlooking Lake Union. The coffee there is really good." Elias nodded. "I'll see you there this afternoon." Sophia stood at a distance, watching him. She said nothing, just smiled. She knew she had witnessed something rare, a true leader. Television footage captured Elias leaving the lobby and stepping out into the sunlight. A light breeze blew the hem of his gray coat. "He's not just the CEO of BlueJet," a young reporter reported. "He's proof that kindness can exist in the coldest places." That evening, as the news spread across social media, millions of shares poured in. Under the hashtag #WeSeeYou, people told their own stories of being overlooked, of being discriminated against, and of those who stood up. The story of Flight 482 became a symbol of the respect and service movement in the small hotel room overlooking Lake Union. Elias sat alone by the window. The sunset reflected on the water, brilliant and peaceful. He opened his phone and saw a message from Sophia. "Thank you. Today, I understand why light can exist in the darkness." Elias read it, smiling slightly. He typed back, "Because there is always someone who chooses to light it." He put down the phone and closed his eyes. Outside, the sun was sinking below the horizon, leaving a streak of orange-red light on the water. A new chapter had begun, not just for him, but for everyone who had been on that flight. A flight that had proven that sometimes just one right action could change the whole sky. It rained in Seattle the next day. A thin, cold rain fell steadily on the windows of the Harborview Hotel where Elias Morgan was staying. The smell of roasting coffee wafted up from the floor below, mixed with the distant sound of car horns. Elias sat by the window, still in his simple gray suit, holding a cup of hot black coffee, looking out at Lake Union. The water rippled with small waves, just like his emotions no longer intense, but still not quite calm. The phone rang. It was Naomi Lee. "Good morning, Elias. I know you want peace and quiet, but there's something you should know." Her voice was stern, a little urgent. Elias put down his cup. "Tell me, the original video from yesterday's flight has now passed 12 million views. Major news outlets have republished it. BlueJet is in the middle of a storm. Some are praising you as a hero. Others are calling it a PR stunt." Elias sighed softly. As usual, people tend to believe the stories they want to believe. "And another thing," Naomi continued, "the internal report shows that it's not just the Catherine Doyle incident. In the last 6 months, there have been 12 similar complaints, mostly from minority customers. Some were deleted from the system. You know what that means." Elias fell silent. He looked out at the rain, his voice low. "It means this wasn't an accident. This is a disease." "I told Karen," Naomi replied softly. "She agrees to a full investigation, but they want you to take the lead." Elias nodded, his voice firm. "Okay, call it Operation Clean Wing. We'll clear the flaps." Naomi chuckled, relieved to hear his familiar firm voice again. After hanging up, Elias opened his laptop. He began composing a letter to all BlueJet employees. No PR, no flowery language, just the truth. We cannot fly high if our wings are covered with dust. Every act of disrespect is a crack in the trust of passengers. I don't want a strong empire. I want a humane airline. If anyone still believes that, Let's start over today. He read it again, then pressed send. By noon, it was still raining, but Elias decided to go outside. He put on a woolen cap and a long coat and walked along the path to the lake. Colorful umbrellas lined the sidewalk, steam rising from the road. No one recognized him, which he liked. He stopped by the small cafe Naomi had mentioned. Inside, the lights were warm yellow, and soft jazz music played. A table near the window was empty. He ordered an espresso and sat down. A moment later, Sophia Tran walked in. She was wearing a white sweater, her hair tied back, her eyes still as bright as the day she flew in. She saw him, smiled slightly, and approached. "You still chose the table by the window. I guessed right." Elias nodded. "I like looking at the rain. It reminds me that everything can be washed clean." Sophia sat down. "I just got an email. BlueJet has officially appointed me as a customer safety assistant." "I can't believe it." Elias looked at her, his eyes kind but stern. "Believe me, you deserve it. But Sophia, from now on, you're going to have to be strong, because change is never easy." She nodded. "I know, but I want to learn." "Then learn by listening," Elias said. "Listen to the people. The rest of the world chooses to ignore." There was a warm silence between them. Then Sophia took her phone out of her pocket. "You should see this." On the screen was a short clip filmed by a passenger, showing Elias sitting silently in the cabin while being insulted, with the caption, "Strength doesn't need screaming." The video had been shared more than 5 million times. In the comments section, thousands of people recounted their experiences of discrimination, then thanked him for seeing themselves through him. Elias watched the clip, feeling an indescribable feeling. He didn't like being famous, but this time he felt it was useful. If this story helps someone get treated better, then all the fuss is worth it. Sophia smiled. "Do you think Catherine will come back?" Elias mused. "I don't know. But if she's honest, I'll give her a chance. Not because forgiveness is easy, but because I believe people can learn." In the afternoon, Naomi Lee called the newspaper, Elias. "The media is still surrounding, but the council has finished its meeting. They want to broadcast your speech nationwide, on Morning America, tomorrow morning." Elias was silent for a few seconds. "Okay, but I don't want to talk about myself. I want to talk about Sophia." Naomi was surprised. "Sophia?" "Yes, I want everyone to know. It wasn't me who changed this airline, but an intern who dared to tell the truth." That evening, Elias wrote his speech. It was not long, not dramatic, but sincere. He began yesterday. "I was denied a seat I had paid for. But what hurt most was not the seat, but the feeling of not belonging. And I know millions of people have felt the same way." He continued. "A young woman bravely spoke out when everyone was silent. She had no position, no power, but she had what I cherish most, conscience. And it was that conscience that saved a company. The next morning, the whole country watched the show." Sophia sat in her new office, in front of the small television screen. When Elias said her name, she covered her mouth and tears welled up in her eyes. Her colleagues stood up and applauded. Elias ended his speech with this message: "I don't want apologies. I want a commitment that we will no longer be silent in the face of injustice. And if you have ever been disrespected, remember, your worth does not need anyone's permission." When the program ended, social media exploded. The hashtags Basher Clean Wing and Alls We See You topped the national trending list. Several other airlines announced they were reviewing their policies. At BlueJet headquarters in Chicago, Naomi watched the news screen and breathed a sigh of relief. Karen Fox stood beside her, her eyes sparkling. He didn't just save the company, he saved the trust. In the afternoon, Elias returned to the hotel. The rain had stopped, and the sunlight was soft through the trees. The staff had left a handwritten letter on the table. There was no sender's name. It simply read, "Thank you for not abandoning us. Catherine." Elias read it, smiling slightly. He folded the letter and placed it carefully in his pocket. Then he went outside and walked slowly along the lake. Seattle was quieter than usual this afternoon. He felt a lightness in his heart, not pride, but serenity. He knew he had just begun something bigger, not just reforming an airline, but restoring people's faith in justice. In the sky, a BlueJet plane streaked by, leaving a long white trail in the clouds. Elias looked up, his eyes shining. "Fly," he whispered, and this time, with respect. 2 weeks after the Flight 482 incident, BlueJet headquarters in Chicago seemed to have come alive after a storm. People worked quickly but quietly, in the hallways. There were no longer any averted glances when the leader walked by. Instead, there were nods, small smiles, and a strange feeling respect. Elias Morgan walked into his office. Behind the large glass windows, the bustling city of Chicago loomed, its skyscrapers reflected in the river. He had traveled far in his career, but he had rarely felt so close to people as he did now. On the table was a thick file, the Operation Clean Wing report. Naomi Lee stood waiting beside him, holding a tablet. "I've already read it," she said, "and Elias, the results made me shudder." Elias opened the file, flipping through the pages. Statistics appeared, hundreds of complaints, many reports ignored, even edited. He was silent for a long time. Naomi said softly, "It's not just the employees, but also the middle management. They use their power to cover up." Elias closed the file, his eyes deep. "We can't fly if our wings are broken. We have to be tough." Naomi nodded. "I've prepared a plan to retrain all frontline staff. But there's one thing." She hesitated. "Some shareholders are worried that digging deeper will affect the company's image. They suggested stopping the investigation at this level." Elias looked at her, his eyes calm but firm. "Naomi, I didn't build BlueJet to be the biggest airline. I built it to be the most trustworthy. An image is only beautiful when it reflects the truth." Naomi looked at him, then smiled a rare smile of reassurance. "I knew you would say that." The door swung open. Sophia Tran walked in, holding a small box. "Sorry to interrupt. I have something you should see." Elias gestured for her to sit. "What is it?" Sophia opened the box. Inside was an old BlueJet badge, lightly rusted at the edges. "I found this when I was cleaning out the supplies at the training center. The back has the words 'Serve with Heart' engraved on it. I think you should keep it." Elias looked at the badge for a long time, then smiled slightly. "This is the logo from the first version, when BlueJet only had 3 planes. I even asked for every penny of investment myself," Sophia whispered. "Maybe it's time to bring that heart back." "Sir." Elias nodded, placing the badge on the desk, right in the center. "I want every employee to see this when they come into the office." Naomi added, "I'll have that slogan reprinted on all the new training boards." That afternoon, Elias attended a conference call with all of his flight and customer service staff. Hundreds of faces were on the big screen, people in Los Angeles, people in Atlanta, people in New York, all waiting for him to speak. Elias's voice rang out slowly and clearly. "We have been through difficult days. I know many of you are tired, afraid, even ashamed. But today, I do not want to talk about mistakes. I want to talk about opportunities. Opportunities to be ourselves again. He paused, then continued, I have read all the feedback. I see not only the fault, but also the fear. Many people remain silent because they are afraid of losing their jobs. Many do not speak up because they think no one will listen. But today, I want you to know I am listening, and I will not let the truth be buried again. A hush fell. A female employee at the Dallas end of the bridge burst into tears, covering her mouth with her hand. At the other end of the bridge, several people bowed their heads. Elias looked at them, his voice low. We can't expect passengers to respect us if we don't respect them, and we can't call BlueJet a family if someone in our family is left out. Naomi looked at the screen, saw the reactions. No one left. Everyone was listening, really listening. When the meeting ended, Sophia walked into the room, carrying a cup of tea. The training people just texted me. They said they're starting a new program next week. They're calling it Fly with Heart. Elias chuckled. They sure know how to name things. Sophia looked at him and asked quietly, Do you feel a little better? Elias mused. Yes. But I know the real journey has only just begun. Change isn't measured by speeches. It's measured by how people treat each other when no one is filming. That evening, Elias returned to his apartment. He turned on the lights, hung up his coat, and sat down on the sofa. The TV screen played the news again. BlueJet comes back strong from crisis. CEO Elias Morgan's story continues to inspire the nation. He didn't finish watching. He turned off the TV and reopened his inbox. A new email from Catherine Doyle. Mr. Morgan, I have completed counseling and am volunteering at the Service Training Center. I am not looking for forgiveness, just for change. Thank you for not taking away my opportunity. Elias read it and smiled. He replied briefly, Any broken wing can be mended, if one really wants to fly. Closing his laptop, he went out onto the balcony. The Chicago night air was chilly, the wind carrying a faint scent of smoke. Down on the street, the car headlights cast tiny stars. Elias looked at them, feeling calm. He recalled his father, who had taught him to fly model airplanes when he was 8 years old. Back then, whenever Elias's paper airplanes fell, his father would say, Do you know why they fell? Because you folded them in a hurry. Anything made in a hurry doesn't fly far. Elias smiled, saying softly to himself, Perhaps father is right. That night, before going to sleep, he wrote a few lines in his diary, a habit that few people know. July 22nd. The rain has stopped. The storm has passed. But its echoes still linger. I realize that there are lessons not in management books, but in how we treat others when they are weaker than us. A leader is not the one who stands at the top, but the one who stands when someone falls. As he put down his pen, Elias felt his heart soften. The greatest battle was over, but the journey to maintain the values he had just won was still long. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, felt real sleep, the sleep of someone who had done the right thing, despite the cost. Tomorrow morning, the sun will rise over Chicago again, and BlueJet, the airline once plagued by prejudice, is truly taking off again, with wings not just of steel, but of faith. One morning in early fall, as the Chicago air still smelled of dew and the leaves began to fall on the streets, Elias Morgan walked into the main hall of BlueJet. Today was a special day, the launch of a new training program called Fly with Heart. There were no fresh flowers, no grand stage, just a large, bright, warm room where nearly 500 employees gathered. In front, A large screen projected a simple line. Respect is the wings that keep us flying. Elias sat in the front row, flanked by Naomi Lee and Sophia Tran. Rachel Ortiz was there, too, in her new dark blue uniform. She was chatting with a group of young flight attendants, smiling and giving them friendly instructions. Elias looked around and saw many new faces. But there were also old faces, people who had worked under Catherine Doyle. They looked at him differently, not with fear, but with gratitude and respect. Naomi leaned over and whispered, "Are you nervous?" Elias smiled. "Yes. Every time we start over, it's a test." As the lights in the hall dimmed, the host's voice rang out, soft and warm. "Hello, everyone. Today, we are not just launching a program, but starting a new journey. And the person who started this journey, Mr. Elias Morgan." Applause broke out. Elias stood and walked to the podium. No notes, no rehearsal. He just smiled, looking at the faces before him. "A few months ago, I was on a flight where I was denied a seat that I had purchased," he began, his deep voice echoing throughout the room. "But what hurt me wasn't the seat. It was the way the person looked at me, as if I wasn't worthy." The room fell silent. Elias continued, "In that moment, I realized respect is not a given. It needs to be taught, nurtured, and reminded every day. BlueJet had forgotten that, but today, we are here to remember." He paused, then pointed to Sophia. "That girl in the front row." Sophia Tran was the first one to speak up. She didn't do it for praise. She did it because she couldn't stay silent about what was wrong, and that action saved the soul of this company. Sophia blushed. Everyone turned to look at her, then clapped. A few people stood up. Elias nodded his thanks, then continued, "Fly with Heart is not a campaign. It is a commitment. Every time we smile at a passenger, every time we choose to listen instead of judge, we are adding to the wings of BlueJet, because no one can fly alone." His voice trailed off, like a breath. "And if one day I'm no longer here, I only hope you remember one thing. Don't let arrogance make us forget why we started." The whole hall stood up. The applause was long, not because of his position, but because they felt what he said. As the ceremony ended, a young reporter approached and asked for an interview. "Mr. Morgan, after all, what are you most proud of?" Elias thought for a moment, then replied, "It's not that I'm the CEO. It's that I see my employees apologizing and forgiving. That's the greatest achievement of any organization." Outside, the early autumn wind gently shook the treetops. Elias followed Naomi and Sophia to the small garden behind the headquarters, where he often stopped to think. They sat down on the familiar wooden chair. Naomi said, "I still remember the first day you opened BlueJet. There were only 17 people. Who would have thought that we would be sitting here now?" Elias smiled gently. "Back then, I only had two things, faith and a cup of cold coffee. It's still the same now, except the coffee is better." All three laughed. Sophia looked up at the sky, where a BlueJet plane had just taken off. "Every time I see that logo, I feel proud, but I'm also afraid." Elias turned to her. "Afraid of what? Afraid that one day, when things settle down, people will forget the lesson," Elias mused. "You're right. People forget when things are going well, but it's our job to remind them, not with words, but with actions every day." Naomi nodded. "I will make sure the Fly with Heart program is updated every year. It will become a tradition, not just a movement." Elias smiled. "If so, I am relieved." A moment later, Elias's phone rang. It was Karen Fox. "Elias," she said cheerfully. I just got the news BlueJet has the highest customer satisfaction score in 10 years. But more importantly, negative reviews are down 70%. Elias smiled. Thanks, Karen, but let's keep it low-key. You're always so calm, she said. I think the world needs more people like you. After hanging up, Elias looked at the two women sitting next to him, Naomi and Sophia, and said softly, No one can do great things alone. Thank you for being here, Naomi replied softly. We just follow your heart. Sophia smiled. And you taught us that the heart can also lead the way. The afternoon was falling. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, illuminating their faces. A rare moment of peace, when everything seemed to be in its right place. Elias stood up and looked out at the horizon, where the last light of day merged with the flight path of another plane. Everyone has a sky to fly. I just hope that when they fly, they don't forget to bring kindness. Naomi was silent. Sophia nodded slightly. They sat there, letting the wind carry their thoughts away. The image of that fateful flight replayed in Elias's mind, no longer a painful memory, but a reminder. He understood that human life was like a flight, sometimes bumpy, sometimes cloudy. But the most important thing was to keep direction. That night, at O'Hare Airport, a BlueJet plane prepared for takeoff. On the fuselage, just below the logo, were newly painted words, Fly with Heart. No one knows whose idea it was, but Elias Morgan smiled when he first saw it. And on the top floor of the headquarters, in his still-lit office, he sat and wrote a line in his notebook. The strength of a person does not lie in their power, but in the way they make others feel seen and respected. When you fly with your heart, there are no limits that cannot be overcome. Outside, the Chicago sky was darkening, but the light from BlueJet headquarters still radiated warmth. It wasn't just the light of electricity. It was the light of people who had learned to fly with their hearts. A month after the Fly with Heart launch, Elias Morgan decided to return to the skies, not as CEO, but simply as a passenger. He wanted to see how his brainchild was being used. And more importantly, he wanted to hear from the people who had helped BlueJet revive. The flight that day was from Chicago to San Francisco, a familiar route, but this time it had a different meaning. Elias did not book a first-class seat. He chose seat 18C in the middle of the economy cabin, among the regular passengers. He wore a simple shirt and khakis. No name tag, no entourage. Just a middle-aged man on business. As he walked up, the head flight attendant, Rachel Ortiz, suddenly recognized him. Her eyes lit up, and she just smiled. Not revealing his identity, she signaled to the other members of the crew, and they all silently agreed today. He would be treated like any other guest, no special privileges, no distinction. As the plane took off, Elias sat quietly, listening to the engines and watching the flight attendants work. Every greeting, every look, every smile was genuine. There was something different. There was no awkwardness, no industrial politeness. It was all natural. A boy sitting next to him, about 7 years old, looked out the window with wide eyes. His mother said softly, "This is your first time on a plane. Ben." The boy turned to Elias, smiling brightly. "Uncle, are you afraid of the plane crashing?" Elias laughed, "No, because the people who control it know how to fly." The boy nodded, then said softly, "I want to learn to fly too, but my mother said I have to study well first." Elias smiled gently. "Your mother is right. Before you can fly, you need to know how to stand firmly." Halfway through the trip, as Rachel walked by, Elias asked quietly, "How do you like the new training program, Rachel replied cheerfully. I see the staff are more confident. They talk to customers more, listen more. Some of them are still new to it, but they are trying. Elias nodded. You did a good job, Rachel. You are the one who inspired them. Rachel bowed her head slightly. Actually, it was you who made us dare to believe that kindness does not weaken us. A moment later, Sophia Tron appeared. She stepped out of the front cabin, wearing her new supervisor uniform. When she saw Elias, she paused and smiled. I know you won't be sitting still for long. Elias smiled and replied, I just want to make sure everything is flying the right way. Sophia sat down next to him. Everyone remembers what you said. In every training session. I tell the story of Flight 482, but I tell it not as an incident, but as a lesson that respect begins with how you look at others. Elias was silent, his eyes looking out the window. The sky was a deep blue. White clouds spread out like a giant cotton carpet. You know, he said softly, I used to hate flying. Every time I got on a plane, I felt lost, like I didn't belong. But now, I feel at peace. Sophia smiled softly, because you made the sky a safe place for everyone, including yourself. A call came from the back of the cabin. An elderly passenger was having trouble breathing. Rachel and another flight attendant rushed over. Sophia jumped to her feet too. Elias instinctively followed them. He wasn't a doctor, but he had been trained in first aid during safety training. The man was about 60, his face pale, his hand shaking as he gripped the seatbelt. Don't worry, sir, Rachel reassured. We're here. She quickly called the paramedics and took his pulse, while Sophia got the oxygen tank. Elias stood next to him, holding his shoulders. Take a deep breath. Slow down. Everything will be fine. A few tense minutes passed. When the passengers' heartbeats calmed down, the cabin seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The man took Elias's hand and whispered, Thank you. Guys, I thought I wouldn't make it. Elias smiled. No one flies alone, sir. When the situation calmed down, Sophia turned to Elias, slightly shaken. Every time I do this, I realize that this profession is not just about service. It is about taking care of people. Elias nodded. That is something every organization needs to remember. We work with people, not numbers. The flight continued. As the plane landed in San Francisco, passengers stood up, many turning to thank the flight attendants. One young woman told Rachel, I've been on many airlines, but I've never seen such genuine concern. Elias silently watched the scene, his heart filled with indescribable emotion. He didn't need honors. He didn't need the press. Just seeing those smiles, he knew he was on the right track. As everyone left the cabin, Sophia walked over and said, Mr. Morgan, thank you for coming on this trip. I think you saw the results. Elias smiled. I see, and I'm proud. But remember, Sophia, never let kindness become a rare thing. She nodded. I promise. Outside the airport, the sea breeze blew strongly, carrying the salty scent of the bay. Elias pulled up his collar and stood watching the BlueJet take off again. The sunlight reflected off the fuselage, and the words "Fly with Heart" stood out against the clear sky. Naomi called, her voice cheerful. Elias, I just received the report. After implementing the program, customer satisfaction scores increased by 32%. Other companies are following our model. Elias smiled. Good. But the important thing is not the score, but the people. Naomi smiled. I knew you would say that, but sometimes numbers are also how the world measures how much good we have created. Elias hung up and looked up at the sky. A light breeze blew, bringing with it a feeling both familiar and new. He walked, blending into the bustling crowd of the airport, no one recognizing him as the CEO of BlueJet. And he liked that, because he didn't want to be remembered as a CEO, but as someone who reminded the world of respect. As he passed through the gate, a janitor, a thin man with graying hair, smiled at him. Elias stopped and greeted him. "Have a nice day." The man was surprised, then replied with a gentle smile, "Thank you. It's been a long time since anyone said that." Elias continued walking, his heart as light as a cloud. Perhaps it was in those simple moments that BlueJet truly soared, not only in the sky, but in the hearts of people. That afternoon, sitting in his small hotel room overlooking San Francisco Bay, Elias wrote in his notebook, "We cannot change the world in a day, but every act of kindness, however small, is a gust of wind that helps the world fly further." Today, I see that BlueJet is not only flying in the right direction, but also in the right heart. He closed the book, smiled, and looked out the window where the sunset was dyeing the sky red. Outside, another plane took off, leaving a long trail of light. Elias whispered, almost as if to himself, "Never forget to fly with your heart." 3 months later, the name BlueJet has become more than just a household name in the airline industry. It has become a symbol of positive change in American corporate culture. The story of Flight 482 is taught in management classes and has inspired countless others who are fighting workplace injustice. But for Elias Morgan, it's not about fame. It's about a daily reminder that the right path must always be kept alive by actions, not just words. That morning, Elias attended the National Conference on Equality and Respect in Business in Washington, D.C. He was invited to give the opening keynote address. When he stepped onto the stage, the large auditorium was silent. In the front row, he saw Sophia Tran and Naomi Lee sitting side by side, smiling. Next to them was Rachel Ortiz, in her BlueJet uniform, her face lit with pride. Elias looked at the audience, holding no papers. His voice was low and steady. "I don't come here as a CEO. I come here as a man who was rejected because of the color of his skin. But instead of being angry, I chose to stand up, not for revenge, but for change." He paused for a few seconds, his eyes scanning the room. "What I learned is, power is not in position, but in choice. We can choose to be silent, or we can choose to speak. We can choose to follow the crowd, or we can choose to do what is right. And sometimes, what is right is the loneliest thing." The hall fell silent. A few people nodded. A middle-aged woman in the back row shed tears. Elias continued, "But when that loneliness is lit by kindness, it spreads like stars. We don't need perfect heroes, just real people who understand." The applause was overwhelming, not formal, but spontaneous. Elias bowed slightly, then added, "If there is anyone in this room who feels unseen, unappreciated, I want to say you are worthy. You don't have to look like anyone else to be valuable." After his speech, many people came to shake his hand. A young student, a man of color, came up to him trembling. "Sir, I study aviation. I wanted to quit because I thought no one would accept me as a pilot. But after your story, I will continue." Elias took his hand, looked him straight in the eye. "Don't just keep going. Fly high. And when you are in the cockpit, remember that the sky belongs to all of us." That afternoon, he left the convention center and took a walk along the National Mall. The leaves were falling, and a cool breeze rustled his gray coat. He stopped by the reflecting pool. where the Lincoln Memorial was reflected in the water. The sight reminded him of his father, the man who had taught him his first lesson in patience. Elias opened his phone and saw a new message from Catherine Doyle. She had been officially rehired as an in-house trainer, in charge of BlueJet's ethics program. The message was just one line: "Thank you for believing that I can be better." Elias typed back, "Everyone deserves a second chance, as long as they know why they need it." That evening, Elias sat in his hotel room, looking out at the starry sky. He took out his old notebook, which had accompanied him for many years, and began to write. "I used to think success was when planes took off on time and profits increased steadily. But now I understand. True success is when every employee, be it flight attendants or security guards, feels respected, when they smile genuinely, not because they are forced to, but because they are proud. Only then will the company truly fly high." He closed the book, his eyes quiet but bright. Sophia's voice from weeks ago echoed in his head. Do you think BlueJet can be a model for the world? And now he could answer, "No need to be a model. Just be yourself, the most authentic." The next day, at BlueJet headquarters in Chicago, the team was preparing for a special flight. Hope One, the airline's first charity flight, carrying doctors and volunteers to hurricane-hit Louisiana. Sophia and Rachel were the main coordinators. Before the plane took off, Elias suddenly appeared at the airport. He walked in, not wearing a suit, just a light blue shirt. Sophia saw him and ran over. "Are you here to see us off?" Elias smiled. "I'm not just seeing you off. I'll fly with you." Rachel laughed. "So today, you're the anonymous passenger again, no?" Elias said. "I'm the one studying today." On the plane, when he saw the volunteers laughing and talking, when he saw the flight attendants being attentive to each person, Elias felt a peaceful happiness spread throughout his body. He no longer had to worry about where BlueJet was going, because now he knew the airline was being led by the hearts of thousands of people. As the plane passed through the clouds, the morning light shone through the window, reflecting on his face. Sophia sat next to him and asked softly, "Do you ever feel afraid that one day everyone will forget this?" Elias smiled. "I am not afraid, because when the seed is planted in the right place, it will grow, whether I am here or not." Sophia was silent, staring out at the open blue sky. "I think you're the one who made me believe in good," Elias replied softly. "No. You just need someone to remind you that good still exists within you." When the plane landed, the group was warmly welcomed by the locals. A little girl ran up to Elias and gave him a doodle of a blue airplane. "I drew this for you. I want to fly when I grow up." Elias bent down and smiled gently. "And I will fly. Just keep your heart in the right place." That evening, back at the hotel, Elias stood before the mirror, the yellow light reflecting off his face, no longer tired, but calm. He knew his journey was complete. On the table, the old badge that Sophia had given him was still in his wallet. Elias took it out and looked at the engraving on the back serf with heart. He put it on his shirt and said softly, "The heart is still here." Outside, the night sky was filled with stars. A BlueJet plane flew by, leaving a long, thin, white trail of light, like a pen stroke in the sky that said sometimes, "All it takes is one person to dare to believe, and the whole world can change." The story of Elias Morgan is not only an unfair situation on a flight, but also a profound lesson about how we treat each other in our daily lives. The biggest message that the story brings is respect and kindness never depend on power or status, but are built on how we perceive, listen to, and treat each other, regardless of adversity or pressure. Choosing to do the right thing always creates unexpected positive impacts, not only for yourself, but also for the community around you. This lesson reminds us that in any situation, courage, honesty, and determination to stand up for your values will help create great change. It also inspires those who have ever felt overlooked, ignored, that they can absolutely stand up and make a difference through their own actions and perseverance. Thank you for accompanying us through this story. If you find the story inspiring and meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to spread the values of courage, respect, and justice. Every view and every share contributes to creating a community that sees each other with the heart, where everyone deserves respect.